Would you hold my bag?
Would you hold my...
His bag that has cinnamon toast crunch.
Focus is on.
I'm skipping this. I don't care about this.
All right, guys.
Krystal cooked Adam Smith on the DSA debate.
We are now joined in studio by Representative Adam Smith. He is a Democrat. He is from Washington. He is the top Democrat, in fact, on the House Armed Services Committee. And your team actually reached out saying you wanted to have a conversation about the future of the Democratic Party and your ideas therein. So very excited to have that convo. Welcome.
Yeah, good to be on. Thanks for the chance.
Of course. So before we get into all of that, you are at the center of a bunch of very impactful votes as the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee. So if you don't mind, I wanted to start by talking to you a little bit about the NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act. Section 224 has been of a lot of interest to our audience. This is what would effectively partially merge the U.S. military with the Israeli military. You were originally in support of it. You changed your position on it. I just wanted to know about your thought process here.
It wouldn't merge the U.S. military with the Israeli military. What it does is it talks about co-development programs.
Yeah,
so
we can actually put element 1 up on the screen while he's discussing because it has some of the specific language.
The Pentagon has 1,000 different development programs that they're put together for procurement of, I don't know, everything from the F-35 to a radio. And when you do that, you develop a program of record, and the Pentagon works on it. We have, over the course of the last decade, had 3 programs that we co-developed with the Israeli military around drones, around missile defense, counter drones. And so the point of those programs was for the 2 militaries to work together to develop them. Okay. Now, neither controls the other in terms of how they use them. So those were just co-development programs. And this Section 224, when it came up in the committee, said, let's have one person overlook all 3 of those programs, and let's explore the possibility of more co-development programs.
Right. So it says to expand and accelerate bilateral defense technology research, development, testing, evaluation, integration, and industrial cooperation, that goes on to spell out what all that means.
Right, and it didn't create any new program. And by the way, missile defense was the big thing that we had there, and so that was the point of it. And mostly, I see this as a benefit to the U.S. military, particularly when you're talking about missile defense. The Israeli military is really good at it. They can help us develop those systems so that we have a better system. I think it's an incredible exaggeration to say that this would merge the U.S. military, because out of thousands, literally thousands of programs, we would have 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 that we were co-developing with the IDF.
But you've changed your position now, correct? You oppose it. So what are your concerns? Because I'll tell you the concerns, from me personally, I think shared a lot by our audience, is you are well aware there is a reckoning happening with regard to the U.S. relationship 100%. With Israel, especially in the Democratic Party. Yeah. And so what appears from the outside is that while votes are increasingly becoming difficult for Israel to win in terms of overt aid being granted, this would be a way to secure the Israel-U.S. relationship without having that transparency and that democratic accountability that would come from a vote. So that's the concern, is that it would make the Israeli-U.S. military relationship more entrenched in a way that lacks any sort of democratic accountability.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, we're talking about...
What are your concerns then?
Sorry, 2 different questions here. Yeah. My concern is I don't support the Netanyahu government, and I certainly don't support what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are doing. And that's been, I think, the real challenge for me, is Israel has a right to exist. Israel is threatened profoundly by Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. So how do we help them defend themselves? Well, at the same time, they've got a government that's frankly out of control, particularly in the West Bank. I associate myself with Rahm Emanuel's speech in Tel Aviv last week, where he said Netanyahu has decided that he is going to be able to defeat all of his adversaries. So whether you're talking Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank, Iran, it's perpetual war all the time. And then with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, you've got people who really do want to drive all of the Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Bank, and they're in the government, okay? So the basic idea of the program, when it was first presented to me, like I said, it's co-development programs, and like a missile defense, something we could definitely learn from Israel on. And it's a program. You can decide whether or not to do co-development programs. And by the way, if we decide in Congress that we don't like that program, we can vote it down. It's not outside of the democratic process. We don't have to vote and approve every single program of record that the Pentagon develops. So I don't agree with that aspect of it. But a couple of constituents in particular reached out to me and explained that, look, at this point, voting for anything that integrates the U.S. and the Israeli government further, given where the Netanyahu government is at, is just a statement we don't want to make right now. And I agreed with that. And that's what caused me to change my mind on that particular issue.
So you've said you would vote against that on the House floor.
I would vote to remove it from the bill, yes.
So you are ranking member, House Armed Services. That makes you one of the four most important people in D.C. in terms of what ends up in the NTAA. And for our audience,
except for the fact that I'm in the minority.
You're in the minority, of course.
And I don't control what the majority does by any stretch of the imagination.
But what I wanted to know is if you would use that position when it comes to conference, which is when and this is for our audience, I know obviously you know this, when the Senate version is merged with the House version and any difference are reconciled.
I will advocate for the removal of that provision.
And if it's not removed, will you refuse to sign off on the conference report?
I don't know that I would go that far. It depends on what else is in the bill. I mean, look, the bill itself has the massive problem that it's continuing to fund the war in Iran, which is an utter disaster. So I am probably not going to vote, well, almost certainly not going to vote for the bill as it comes off the House floor now, just in and of itself, regardless of that particular section. Just because of that one section, I don't know that I would vote against the entire bill.
Well, and that was actually the other thing I wanted to ask you about is why are Democrats considering supporting an NDAA at all while Trump is prosecuting a disastrous, illegal, unconstitutional war, which to your credit, you've been very vocally outspoken against?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of layers to that. First of all, and this is where we get into some of those divisions within the Democratic Party, I believe that we do need to have a Department of Defense. We need to support our troops. We have national security threats that we have to be prepared to deal with. All right, so...
Do people disagree with that?
Well, there are some... Look, the Democratic Socialists of America, in their platform, is defund the Department of Defense. It's in their platform.
Have any of the candidates that you're aware of held that position or advocated that position?
I
see lots of people advocate for cutting the Pentagon, which I would agree with. That you may agree with as well. I don't know. I haven't heard anyone advocating for getting rid of it. At least nobody who's elected to office.
Yeah, no, they've. But it's part of the DSA platform, okay, and also a broader part.
Do you agree with everything, single word of the Democratic Party platform?
I do not. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, but.
This is where I think he's got to start realizing he might have fucked up on this. Is this where it falls off the rails?
So should you be held to, whatever views are theoretically in some policy position paper, or should we deal with the reality of what your positions are?
Why would they put it in there in the first place? But aside from that particular point, there's the larger question of the role the U.S. plays in the world. And this is where I do disagree with the DSA. I mean, their general position is that the U.S. is responsible for most of the conflict in the world. And I've heard these arguments about whether you're talking about Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, that everything they're doing is merely in reaction to.
Is it not? I mean, that's just the objectively correct position. We're the world police, of course. Yeah, no, I was thinking of Estonia's lion's share of responsibility for our starvation policies in Cuba. I was thinking about what Zimbabwe must address for the war against Iran. Mongolia, you will pay for your crimes. Allowing Israel to commit genocide against the Palestinians. It's time. Peru. Oh, you thought you could get away with it. Peru. How dare you, Peru? Why would you invade Afghanistan? Why would you invade Iraq? Who could forget? Who could forget? Malaysia. Who could forget Malaysia's military action against Libya? And Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is now led by a man, Ibrahim Traore. Okay? And Traore does not do things halfway. And he certainly wasn't doing it halfway when Burkina Faso invaded Vietnam. He was doing it full way. Poland? Oh, don't get me started on Poland. Poland, leading the coalition of the willing in the Korean War that could amount to a genocide. Who could forget? And the Philippines. Philippines will pay for its crimes against Nicolas Maduro. That's right. It was the Philippines that did the special military operation. You see how stupid it sounds? The reason why I'm doing this is because I need people to understand how stupid of a statement this is. Oh, all these other countries around the world engage in actions and they claim they're doing it because of us. Yes, yes, we are the hegemonic superpower. It is our fault and our responsibility.
Us. And I don't agree with that. I think we've done some bad things without any question, but I do think we face threats that we need to be in a position to deter. So I'm not, going to say that we shouldn't ever have a National Defense Authorizing Act. The second piece of this I'm curious.
Well, I'm
curious what people think about this.
Just to pause on that point for 1 second. The argument I'm making, and I think other people, is not that we should never have a National Defense Authorization Act. It's that in this moment, Democrats, as you know, have precious little leverage that they can use as Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Trump is prosecuting what is an illegal war. There was a war powers resolution that was passed through the House and the Senate that he is in violation of.
Just to be clear.
Such a good line of questioning. Truly the GOAT at this. Like, she's working through the steps by being like, listen, no one is saying abolish the American military, but don't you feel like you should play politics right now? This is a profound point of leverage where you can address and maybe even force Trump to do things that might be to the benefit of the American public. By withholding your vote on the NDAA, you could cause Donald Trump to potentially go back to the ceasefire negotiation with Iran. Now, of course, guys like Adam Smith don't want that. They're just trying to find the most appropriate position they can arrive at. Okay, Wesley Bell might be cooked. Nancy Pelosi's heading for a campaign rally on healthcare for Representative Wesley Bell. Oh my God, he must be cooked as fuck if you got Nancy Pelosi, the big boss dog, coming in hot. Holy fuck, they must have had horrible internals, dude. Are you kidding me? Also, Nancy Pelosi. Oh, dude, this actually gives me hella confidence.
This bigger part of the problem. Even if this war was legal, it would still be a disastrous, stupid, terrible, horrible idea.
We 100% agree on that. But it is also illegal.
Yeah.
So why not use this moment when they would dearly like
Democratic
votes?
I'm not disagreeing with you on that at all.
So you think that, so you won't support an NDA and you don't think the rest of the Democratic Party?
There will probably be some who will and some who won't. I mean, and again, how do we use that leverage in an effective way? And keep in mind also the National Defense Authorizing Act doesn't actually fund anything. It's not the appropriations bill, it's the authorizing bill, which is the other point I've been trying to get to. Congress needs to exercise oversight of the Department of Defense. We've got a provision in the bill that would bring back collective bargaining for all DoD employees, which we got put into the bill. We've got a variety.
Bro said labor unions. Bro said, listen, I'm doing this for the labor unions, okay? I'm doing this for the unionized defense contract shops. Sick, man. Thank you. What, you don't want your war criminals to unionize? Wow, Hasan. I guess you're a real piece of shit for that one. That's such a funny way to sell this.
Different things that fence Secretary Hegseth's budgets if he doesn't, begin to turn over more information. It's us exercising our oversight. If we pull back from that and don't do anything, that winds up with the executive branch having all the control and all the authority if we just don't pass anything. So there are some things in this bill that exercise oversight of the Pentagon. We step back from that. Trump just goes and does what he wants to do without any congressional oversight. So that's the balance. Because I think the mistake when you say leverage, the notion is if we say we won't vote for it, the Republicans will therefore give us this, 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 and this.
Well, it'll put some pressure on them.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this, the
sure, it will, but they may not. But it may not result in that. So yes.
But it may be worth a try. The Iran war is already very unpopular,
100%.
and yeah,
100%.
But let me ask you about your vote for the Thomas Massie amendment, which would block aid to Israel. And this is another one where you had told one outlet that you were planning to vote against it, and then you changed your mind and decided to vote for it. You put on a statement saying that you wanted to send a message to Benjamin Netanyahu. I'd love for you. There's actually been a lot of pro-Israel folks who've been attacking you, saying you gave in to pressure tactics, et cetera. I'd love for you to explain in your own words how you came to this place, because I do think your vote and others are quite extraordinary, given where consensus within Washington has been on the relationship with Israel. You had even Nancy Pelosi voting for this amendment yourself, given your position and your track record. You're someone who's been supported by AIPAC. Just take us through
this is going to take a minute. This is going to take
That's fine. Take your time.
Okay, because the real challenge here is what Israel has historically been. Okay, Israel was historically a democratic state in the middle of no democratic states. They were a very strong ally of the U.S. We partnered with them on a variety of different things, counterterrorism being the biggest thing during the ISIS fight and elsewhere. So you've got that historical.
Okay, there is one state that the United States of America has more reliably and consistently leaned into in order to fight against ISIS, and I'm sorry, it's not Israel. It's actually Iran. And I know for a fact that Adam Smith knows that. Okay? It's Iran. Also, we're burning the candle on both ends because our other partner, NATO partner, Turkey, is literally fucking propping up ISIS at our behest. So none of it matters. We create the problem. We create the conditions for the problem to expand rapidly. Then we actually lean into the problem. We make more of the same fucking problem. Only to then turn around and then work with the guys who are fighting the problem. And then we make those guys the number one enemy. Adam Smith of Wealth of Nations fame, he fell off. Yeah, he did. This guy wrote the book. This guy wrote the book on capitalism and all of its, major critiques. And here he is failing to fucking address a single damn point on breaking points.
Relationship. And then you've got the reality of what Israel is living in. And that is that they are the only, well, except for Ukraine, they're the only country in the world, they're the only country in the world that from the day they were founded, people have been trying to eliminate them. I mean, there's no other country in the world that Yemen and Saudi Arabia fought, but the Houthis never said that Saudi Arabia didn't have a right to exist. Okay, very existence wasn't on the line. When Israel came into being, from that very moment, they have been attacked constantly. And yeah, it comes down to a fundamental question: does Israel have a right to exist? Now, I'll tell you, and this is absolutely the DSA position, is that they don't. Okay.
Well, let's pause on that. I want to get to the DSA, and I don't want to fight you on all of this, but I want you to get to your point. I got to get through
this. Yeah. I got to get through this. Okay. So if you have a situation where
I love hearing about what the DSA believes and what it doesn't believe from a guy who thinks it's just everything is communism. Like, what the fuck does this guy know about the Democratic Socialists of America? Get the hell out of here.
Israel is threatened on all sides. And I know it's like, well, no, it's not saying they don't have a right to exist, just they have to let all the Palestinians back in, and then effectively the Jews no longer control Israel. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, but don't you, isn't the idea of equal rights for all ethnicities something that you...
Yeah, dude, never, oh no, don't ask a Zionist about equal rights and equal representation. Oh no, big mistake, worst mistake of my life. And yes, this is the moment of cognitive dissonance for liberal Zionists as well. The moment that you say, okay, right to return, equal rights and equal representation, if you ask a Zionist about this, even if they are liberal Zionists, with the only exception being Brad Lander, he is the only person who I've ever heard say that they are liberal Zionists and then not bring up the demographic concerns of having a Jewish ethno-state. Only guy outside of Brad Lander, every liberal Zionist will say we have demographic concerns. Why can't we have a state? Why can't we have a state? We have demographic concerns, which means we can't allow the Arabs, the non-Jews, to become a majority, because if they become a majority, then they will vote to, destroy us.
Support as a Democrat?
Well, yes, Brad has some crazy takes as well. Make no mistake. He says, Brad says settlers would stay in Palestinian territory and be minorities in a Palestinian majority state. I personally think that's a wild take. Okay. That's why I'm a one-stater, because I don't think the settlers would do that. But I think he's banking on that too. I think his assessment is that, most of those settlers would fucking leave instantly. Regarding your Houthi capabilities assessment a couple hours ago, the IDF has identified significant progress in the capabilities of the Houthis, including in the development of factories underground in remote areas and as secret projects for the benefit of self-production of missiles and drones in Yemen using Iranian knowledge, Ynet says. Regarding airstrikes on Yemen, the goal is far from being achieved as the Air Force increases. This is from 2025. Regarding airstrikes on Yemen, the goal is far from being achieved as the Air Force increases attacks on Houthi seaports and thus thwarts arms shipments for Iran. The model of local production makes the strikes less effective. Like the Hezbollah missile factories in Masyaf, Syria, which Israel destroyed in a special operation about a year ago, the model in Yemen is similar, using mountains and deserts to carve into rock or dig into the ground to create production lines for weapons. The current recommendation of the Intelligence Directorate, certainly after October 7, is that even during the Houthi ceasefire, if it comes due to the cessation of the fighting in Gaza, it should not stop the attack on the regime. Bro, you were cooking on that video. Go back. I know. I'm gonna go back.
Well, sure, but the practical result of this is, if you say there should be equal rights within Israel, but if Israel allows it, they cease to exist as a country.
No, they cease to exist as a Jewish ethno-state. That's very different from ceasing to exist as a country.
Oh, come on. Hold on. Stop.
Why is
no, we got to drill
an issue for U.S. taxpayers?
We got it.
Dude, what? Like, Do people not realize that when they come across like this, it just literally feeds into the conspiracy? Brother, get a politician on the record to talk about Israel and say something like, yeah, I personally don't, I personally don't believe a country is allowed to exist if it maintains an apartheid, right? If it maintains an occupation. Don't you agree? What about your liberal values? And he goes, whoa, hold on now. I am not on board with that. They get so crazy about Israel, bro. They get so fucking crazy about Israel. It's crazy. It blows my mind. You are from Washington State. You've been in office since like 1994. What gives?
Israel comes to me in my dreams. What gives?
Seriously, what is happening? It's just so funny that they just like, when Israel comes up, they're like, whoa, I have to defend it as vociferously as I possibly can. And it's so stupid. Just be normal, dude. Can you not be a normal human being? Can you not be like, can you not try to find the most like mathematically silly equation here, where on the one hand you're like, yeah, Israel's done a genocide, or he probably doesn't recognize that, but he's like, they're doing war crimes. I hate the Netanyahu government. But also at the same time, like, we still got to give them money. We still got to give them weapons. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's not common sense at all. It doesn't, to the average person, when they hear that, they go, this is dumb. You sound stupid.
To drill down on that.
Okay.
All right. They cease to exist as an ethno state. So basically, Jews would live in Palestine and be governed by the Palestinians, by the Arabs. Okay. And maybe that's just what has to happen in the minds of some people, but understand the consequences of it.
Understand the consequences of it, Krystal. Those fucking filthy Arabs, they would kill all the Jews. They are barbarians. They're rapists. They're monsters. What don't you get? And then Krystal can turn around and be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's a little place called Dearborn where Muslims already live in a totally diverse democratic process. So the idea that you think Muslims are incapable of living in this like democratic structure where they have equal say and equal rights is unbelievably racist. Do you not think of your Muslim constituents when you say this? It's insane. It's racist towards the Jews too, ironically enough. Like, oh, Jews, they're just violent no matter what. They will have to kill the Muslims. And then also on the other hand, you're like, well, the Muslims are violent and no matter what, they have to kill the Jews. No, man, that's not how this works. There's never been a moment in history where that's how it has worked, okay? It's just insane. It's this totally distorted attitude where you're like, well, Jews have a special gene where they have to oppress the non-Jews. And then also Arabs have a special gene where they have to rape and kill every Jewish person. That's why they can't have a fucking equal state. It's ridiculous. Of course, it's also commonplace, as I have explained over and over again. This was the commonplace attitude. We cannot free the slaves. They will do to us what we've done to them. We cannot abolish the apartheid. The black people, if they get political power and equal representation, they'll do to us what we've done to them during the apartheid. This is how it always goes. This is what people say all the time. And history has proven that wrong every single time. Yes, liberal Zionism insinuates that only Jews can govern themselves. It's such a neurotic approach, too, other than how racist it is also built around this neuroses that, like, if Jews don't govern themselves, the Holocaust is going to happen. Dog, the Jews have been living in the United States of America with varying degrees of systemic discrimination early on and none whatsoever now for quite a while. The notion that Israel has to exist for that to take place is offensive to me as a goddamn American, okay? I hated it when Joe Biden said that. Joe Biden was like, if Israel doesn't exist, no Jew is ever safe. It's like, that sounds like a threat. You're the American president. What do you mean? There's like 7 million Jews here. What the fuck are you talking about? This is the most Jewish country on the planet, other than fucking Israel. What are you saying right now? New York is the most Jewish city in the world.
Understand why Israel was created in the first place, so that the Jews would have some place to go, okay?
Right,
and
but
to just blithely say, well, yeah, it'll go away and it'll be fine. So that's point one.
Well, first of all, you're mischaracterizing my position. But
well, what is your position?
Second of all,
what is your position?
Second of all, you're ignoring that Israel was not created and a land with no people.
No. I know it wasn't. No,
there were people there. They were displaced.
Right. Very few countries ever were.
The Nakba.
Yeah.
There was a dispute over land.
Yes.
And the Israel today, which I think is what you were getting to, is an apartheid ethno-state that, and I don't think you use this language, but that is in the process of committing a genocide. So we can debate the Israel of the past and the various historical interpretations of how we got to this place. But I think you're correct when you say we have to deal with the reality of today. And, I would argue that it's not just the Netanyahu government. We can certainly argue that point.
Yeah.
But, we have Jake Sullivan, who just came out and said that he regrets the Biden policy of the bear hug. He thinks they should have done more to restrain Israel. And I'm wondering if you have any regrets, because now you're voting in a somewhat different way, both with the NDAA shift in position, with the Massey Amendment saying, hey, we should blockade. I want to send a message to Netanyahu. At the peak of the Gaza onslaught, you had a complete siege. You had entire neighborhoods that were leveled. They created the largest population of child amputees. Do you have any regrets about your votes during that time period?
I don't, because...
That's a crazy admission. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my God. Oh, holy moly. I don't. You didn't even have to, you didn't even have the dignity to say, like, yeah, I actually do think it was inappropriate. Fuck, man. These people, oh my God, they are demonic. They are demonic.
Everyone forgets about October 7th. Everyone forgets about what Hamas...
Yeah, no, definitely. That's what happened. Come on, man. October 7th happened. We should allow them to do a genocide. Like, what do you mean? This guy is so unbelievably demonic. It almost gave me a heart attack, says Mo Chakich.
Washington.
He just tried to come in all nice, too.
Austin, Hezbollah, and Iran have done, and their desire is to wipe out the state of...
Yeah. Also, famously, no one ever thinks about October 7th, and everyone has forgotten about October 7th. What are you talking about? There's never a day that goes by where someone defending Israel doesn't go, oh, remember October 7th? It's kind of the whole point of this genocide is like, well, October 7th happened, so we got to fucking kill them all,
Israel and all the Jews living there. Is that not, that's in Hamas's charter, and Hamas is still extant. They're still doing that. I don't like...
The whole argument is Israel needs to be safe for Jews, which it isn't, unless it only Jews live there. It's not hard to comprehend, honestly. Wait, what? No, it's a ridiculous argument because it's currently a Jewish majority state and it's objectively unsafe for Jews. Like, what do you think? What do you think is a safer place for Jews to live in? The Upper West Side of New York City or fucking Tel Aviv? Okay. I feel like New York is objectively a far safer. Sherman Oaks, Beverly Hills. Okay. even Iran, before Israel started and America started blowing it up, where they blew up one of the older synagogues. How did you not name anywhere in South Florida? Oh yeah, Boca Raton.
The way Israel decided to defend themselves. But the solution being proposed is, and this is the consequence of what you're saying is, sorry, we had this idea back in 1948. We were going to give you a state, and that way you could protect yourself against all these attacks. Didn't work out, so go back to Europe. Go wherever. This just isn't going to work anymore.
I think the question,
and I don't think you understand how difficult that is to just go, yeah, I guess that's fine. Because
no, I think the question, let me, and this is not, this is my perspective.
Hasan is a psyop to make the masses believe that 9/11 is real. Yeah. I love that. That 9/11 was fake is an awesome position that I rarely ever encounter in the wild. So respect.
But I think this is also what the Democratic Party base in particular, and most of the country view at this point, is why should our tax dollars, given all the things in the world and all the things in our country,
that's why I voted
that's why I voted for the Massey Amendment. Spent in much more effective ways.
Exactly.
Why should that be going to prop up an ethno-state that is an apartheid state? And I wonder if you agree with that characterization, that has been committing, if you don't want to say genocide, certainly war crimes with that tax money.
But that's fine. Yeah. Look, no, that's why I voted for the Massey Amendment. I don't think we should be sending that money over there. But look, I have concerns about Hamas, about Hezbollah, that people don't seem to share. Let's say that this plays out the way you just.
Why? You are the representative from Washington State. I wish more people would be like, why do you have this concern? Like, no, seriously. What kind of concern does Hamas, what kind of threat does Hamas or Hezbollah pose to the constituents in fucking Washington State? What could they possibly do to Washington State? Are you diminishing the Ansar Allah attacks on Tacoma, Washington? Yeah. But Hamas makes sense if you're in fucking Israel, okay? If you're a member of the Knesset. And even then, the argument is, of course, well, why does Hamas exist? Well, you fucking kind of forced their hand, okay? But it's really funny that guy from Washington's like, you don't understand. I mean, the fucking Houthis, man. Hamas, they pose a existential threat to Washington State. You don't understand. My district is always talking about this.
Describe, and okay, there is no Jewish ethno-state, and the consequence of that is there is no Jewish state. Basically, you have the Palestinians, as they would now be governing that area, and that means Hamas would be governing that area. Do you?
Okay. What makes you believe that the Palestinians that would be governing, first of all, what makes you believe the Palestinians that would be governing the area would democratically vote for Hamas? There is no indication of such a reality. That's number one. Number two, what makes you think Hamas itself, okay, what makes you think Hamas itself would be a violent, militant formation if they had a fucking established nation state and there was no occupation? Like, what are we talking about? People always do the but Hamas thing, but they never even think about it. Like, they have paragliders, idiot. What are they going to do? Paraglide into Lebanon? What are we talking about? They're not Israel. They're not going to fucking besiege other countries in the region. It's a nationalist emancipatory movement against the Israeli occupation, against the Israeli apartheid. They're going to paraglide into Washington State. They're going to paraglide into downtown Tacoma, sir. Wait, wouldn't there still be a Jewish majority even if they integrated the West Bank and Gaza into one state? No, there wouldn't. Because there's approximately 2 million non-Jews that are citizens, Palestinian citizens of Israel, the 48ers. So no, it would, I think it would literally be a majority Palestinian. This is before we even talk about the right to return. And if you were to bring up the right to return, these guys really lose their fucking minds. They're like, oh, we can't have that. We have demographic concerns. This is where the demographic concerns argument comes from. Because there is here's what it is, okay? If you end the apartheid, if you end the occupation, the reality is whether it's a binational commitment or a single state, it'll be majority non-Jews, okay? And from their perspective, that means that they could literally democratically vote to change the name of the state from Israel to Palestine. They could democratically vote to have anti-racism laws. Like they could basically democratically dismantle a lot of the unjust, unequal, and outright racist laws that Israel has implemented. Now, for normal people who don't have, an insane ethno-religious supremacist point of view, you'd be like, that's great. That's what's supposed to happen in a country. What are we talking? That's the end and abolition of an apartheid. That's cool. I like that. But Zionists consider that to be an existential threat. And then they'll just get really fucking racist with it too. They'll say like, oh, they're going to implement Sharia law. Yawn. Ultimately, this is why we say Zionism is racism. Zionism is a fascist ideology, because that is the unironic, unvarnished foundational belief that like non-Jews and Jews cannot live side by side with one another without the Jews dominating the non-Jews. Because non-Jews don't know right from wrong. They're barbaric. They're not superior. Now, I'm not saying every person believes this. Of course, that's not the case. There's plenty of anti-Zionist Jews. There's plenty of Jews that don't actually consider themselves to be Zionists at all. But if you are a Zionist, even of the liberal variety, this is unironically what you believe at the end of the day, which is why if you exhaust the talking points with liberal Zionists, they will inevitably arrive at a similar position to the Benjamin Netanyahus of the world that they seemingly oppose. And of course, never forget, there has never been a period of history where there were more Jewish Zionists than non-Jewish Zionists. Never. From its inception, Zionism was overwhelmingly favored by, oftentimes, unironically, anti-Semitic Christians. First, as a vehicle for settler colonial terrorism, and also a perfect solution to the problem of the perfidious Jews that they thought were ruining British society. That's the Balfour Declaration. And still continued around the globe by Christians for the most part. Evangelical Zionism is a far larger force. It is a prominent defender of Zionism.
Have any problem with that? Do you have any problem with Hamas suddenly becoming a much more powerful entity and having the country, from the river to the sea, if you will?
Hasan, how can you answer a simple question for me? It's an honest question. I'm not here to troll. How can you support the Houthis and say such positive things about them despite their mass human trafficking of tens of thousands of children, some as young as 9 years old? Yeah, I'm not in favor of that. But as far as like an entity, as far as a country that is opposing Israel's genocide, you know, clearly the Palestinians need all the help they can get. You feel me? Also, this is not even the Houthis. This is the former government. Ask that same chatter about Israel hiding pedos. Dog. Ask that same chatter about the human trafficking Israel did to Yemeni Jews. Like, that's such a funny line, because like Israel literally fucking kidnapped Yemeni Jews when they were babies and gave them to Ashkenazi families. It's a real thing. Someone said, dude, what? Yes, I know it was off topic, but a fan of YouTube. Yeah, it was off topic because a fan of yours asked me to ask you, so I did. Okay, well, I hope it helped you understand my position. I would wholeheartedly condemn that. I mean, I condemn all kidnapping of children. Yes, the easiest question of all time. I don't give a fuck who's doing it. Like, I don't know why you think I'm like riding for that. I ride for Easy Company in World War II. Does that mean I ride for segregation? Does that mean I ride for horrifying mistreatment of the LGBTQ? Does that mean I ride for women not being able to work regular jobs? No. I just think what Easy Company did during World War II was fucking dope. You feel me? Do you understand? Does that make sense to you? Like, when you think about the United States of America and its actions during World War II, do you think about segregation, racism, Japanese internment, or do you think about the positive actions that America contributed to by attacking and defeating the Nazi scourge? Honestly, I understand but disagree. Okay. I'm going to ask you that question one more time. Why do you hate Easy Company? Why do you hate the United States of America's actions in World War II? Are you a fan of Adolf Hitler? Or are you a real hater of Adolf Hitler? Because I'm a real hater of Adolf Hitler. No, I obviously hate Hitler. Good. Okay. Do you ride for the Allied forces during World War II? But at the same time, I'm extremely critical of the Allied actions of World War II. Okay. Like what? What the fuck's going on? Is this guy going to be like a clean Vermont understander? Where are we going here, man? Where are you going with this? Did you just say both sides were bad during World War II? No, I would just consider myself a moderate, but I doubt you believe me. No, I believe you. I'm entertaining the conversation. I'm just very confused as to where you're going with this. Do you agree with the actions of Easy Company during World War II? I asked you a very specific question. Do you agree with the actions of Easy Company during World War II, or would you turn around and not salute World War II veterans because you would turn around and say, hey, I'm sorry, America was a segregationist shithole during that time. So I'm too woke. I'm too woke to fucking dick ride Easy Company. So you do. You agree. Okay, well, then you understand my position. Yeah, I would support them, but if I found out they trafficked tens of thousands of kids, I wouldn't know. Dog. America literally instituted chattel slavery. What the fuck are you talking about? What is that if not the trafficking and genocidal actions of a fucking country of millions? Hello? Hello? My point is, do you attribute all of that to the actions of the Allied forces when you're making that calculation? Of course you're not. What is this? Oh, you found their Reddit? Creator Clash. Bro, Hasan and his friends, which Ian has now aligned himself with, say they avowedly support the Houthis and lie on their behalf. Also, don't bother trying to question the validity of the UN report. It's been verified so many times over by many human rights organizations. Who sniped his Reddit account? How sweaty is this lobby? This is the sweatiest of all lobbies. Damn, bro. They said a fan asked him. Turns out he's his biggest fan. He's like, nah, I'm my biggest fan, dog. It wasn't a lie when I said a fan wanted me to ask you this question as a moderate. It's just so funny to be like, hey, man, we really gotta reconsider. While a genocide was ongoing, the actions of one of the only fucking countries in the region that did anything they could to try to impede Israel's genocide. What's really problematic is what they have on their banner. Their banner is anti-Semitic. There's Saudi-backed reports that they were doing child slavery or whatever. Reports from when Saudi Arabia was implementing a famine in Yemen. It's got nothing to do with their banner. Just a straw man. No, I'm just bringing up common critiques, like silly critiques. I'm against supporting a group that traffics kids, regardless if they do good things. Dog, you literally just said you support the American military in World War II. The American government trafficked a fuck ton of children, black children. Okay. So obviously, you have actually been in support of a government that has trafficked millions, entire families, and continued to enslave them. Yeah, I would criticize and be against them. I wouldn't praise them. You just told me you were in support of the American government's actions during World War II. I have the same approach that you do to the Houthis. Important defensive Kyle, very moderate. You can ask about what Destiny's content is like, but no one here will give you an honest take because none of them actually watches content. They probably saw a single clip that they strongly disagree with and wrote Destiny off as some insane conservative. They probably think that Destiny agreeing with Rittenhouse verdict. Oh, long-term fan. Hey, Hasan, long-term fan. A friend of mine wanted to hear what your takes on the Houthis are. Turns out you don't have issues with people who predate on children. Perhaps this was an insincere debate that you posed. Oh. Chatter, delete your Reddit account right now. This chatter is European, UK, I believe. Probably. That makes sense. Don't you constantly complain about people bringing up old clips of you? Now you're bringing up past comments of mine? Wait. You came in here claiming you were a longtime fan who was just simply a moderate. And then we found out that you were defending Destiny 3 years ago in a H3 Productions post brigading at the behest of DGG. It kind of feels like you're not just some random guy. I never said I was a longtime fan. Wait, maybe I misunderstood. How can you support the Houthis? Son was young and 9 years old. Yes, it was off topic. Yeah, it was off topic because a fan of yours asked me, so I did. I would wholeheartedly condemn. I'm very anti-Israel. Honestly, I understand, but I disagree. I think it's immoral. Yeah, I do think about that. I've done extensive research on World War II. Okay, I guess you didn't say you were a longtime fan. You just said you were a fan of my YouTube. He's going to say, I never said I was long. Bro, you never hate when people bring up old clips of you because you're always so consistent. No, I hate when people bring clips out of context of me. It's always just asking questions, ass chatters, dude. Yeah, no, I'm against child trafficking and any kind of child predation. Having said that, when I watch Band of Brothers, a teardrop rolls past my cheek. And I stand up and I salute the brave boys. Hoorah, baby. Regardless of America's history of defending chattel slavery, which is, you know, the enslavement of millions, kidnapping of children, all that stuff. Did that comment look finished and whole to you? They probably think that Destiny agreeing with Kyle Rittenhouse verdict is evidence of this, even though Destiny said what Kyle did was incredibly stupid, but that didn't take away his right to self-defense. It's the most basic take in the world that 99% of people in the world would agree with if they had a reason to discuss, if they had a reasoned discussion and laid on the facts. But unfortunately, most people are unwilling to look past the headline. Brother, I'm going to be honest. You are the number one dick eater of a sex pest who operates a cult. It's very clear you're fighting his battles in other subreddits. You're brigading other subreddits at his behest. And you're doing that here right now. I'm so confused. Develop your own independent thoughts, please. I beg of you. Okay? And That's why it's so unbelievably unproductive to have these sorts of conversations with people like yourself, because you don't have any, like you don't have any investment in arriving at a reasonable conclusion here. You're just in here to further engage with a barrage of half-remembered talking points that you got from somewhere else, a pedantic conversation that gets increasingly tiring. That's it. They'll hear what they think is a bad take and immediately write off everything else that explains the take. I would challenge any H3 fans that have issues with Destiny to bring up a single issue they have with him, and 9 out of 10, I'll find someone who doesn't know the facts surrounding it. Anyway. It is kind of crazy because back in the day, I think like the quality of the debate pervertry has diminished a lot in recent years, as like his audience size has diminished because, you know, he keeps fucking up, he keeps doing horrible shit to everyone in his immediate vicinity, that, you know, even the biggest diehard fans of his inevitably pull out and they're like, oh, I can't do this anymore. You're really fucked up this time. And one thing I've noticed is that while the fan base has become even more cultish, they used to be a little bit more sophisticated, all things considered. Nowadays, it's just not great. Nowadays, it's a hive mind. I think Israel did a number on the cult, the sex pastini cult, and perhaps the court case too.
Will now be a Hamas-run state on the Mediterranean. Are you okay with that?
First of all, I'm not convinced that that would be the reality.
Well,
but
how
second
would it,
of all,
how would it not be
I
the
don't
reality?
know how you can get away from how illiberal it is to not support equal rights for people regardless of if they're Jewish, Arab, Muslim, Christian,
totally with you. Look,
and then the other piece is,
but
I mean,
Hamas
listen,
doesn't support equal rights either.
But do you support a two-state solution? Is that your idea?
Look,
no, Hamas supports the abolition of the apartheid and end of the occupation, which is a far closer position to equal rights. Then the Zionist position is.
Yes.
So how do we get there? How do we get there? No, but listen.
No, let's stop.
Hold on.
I can answer this
How
for
do we
you.
get there at a time?
No, hold
when
on.
you have settlements that have made it effectively impossible.
There's something I have to explain before all of this makes sense.
In order to create a Palestinian state.
Look, let's go back to what you said.
You never want to be, at least optically, you never want to be the guy going, stop, and like yelling over and over again while the host is trying to deliver the end of one point.
Mm-hmm.
I support a two-state solution. I am also aware of the fact that it's probably no longer possible. You didn't let me get that part out. Okay, which is really kind of important to this whole conversation.
I would agree, yes.
And it's very disappointing. I mean, and there's a lot of blame to go around for why we got there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would like to see a two-state solution. I am not naive, as you just described, to know that it's simply not on the table at this point. And that creates a massive, massive problem. But the idea, again, that the easy solution is, okay, we get rid of the Jewish ethno-state, and the details of how Israel is currently running, you know, their country, there are Arabs in the parliament, but there are parts of it that aren't. Okay, so we get rid of that.
Okay.
So what's your idea for what replaces that? You say you're not convinced that it would be a Hamas-run thing.
Well, I've offered that. Listen, I really honestly think that this is something for Palestinians and Israelis to decide. I don't know why it is American taxpayers' business to fund this.
And again, that's why I voted for the Massey Amendment.
But what is actually your idea?
Here's an incredibly...
If you're saying...
Bro thinks the Massey Amendment is just like he voted for the Massey Amendment. You can't criticize me. Like, he thinks it's the magic... He thinks it's like the magic word Like what? You think it's a shield, dude? That's your protection? Good luck. Excuse me. I voted for the Massey Amendment. Okay. Well, you also said you voted to fund Israel's war crimes during the process of the genocide, and you have no, when you recollect on your decisions back then, you have no issues with it.
No, you don't support a one-state solution. You don't support a two-state solution. There is no good solution. That's where you are. That is the reality of where we are now.
Right. And I'm
no good solution.
And I'm open to ideas, but let's understand the history of this. There's a great book called
Oh, I love when these guys go, let's talk about the history. You're about to hear the most one-sided, nonsensical, outright fucking racist garbanzo beans you've ever heard. At least he's done the reading, or at least he's claiming to have done the reading, so that's good. Most people don't even do that. They just repeat shit that they've heard from others. Let's take a look.
Palestine 1936 that described what was going on.
Okay.
There. So you were coming to the end of the British mandate.
Mm-hmm.
And you had, the Jews had been...
Never mind. This is actually shocking. I should have let him cook. Hold on.
Coming in since the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been there a long, long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for, a place to be. The Palestinians were looking to drive out the British. And the Palestinians and the Arabs reached a conclusion in the mid-1930s and said, okay, Jews, you can stay, but you're not going to run anything. Okay? Jews said, no, we can't stay. So they started a civil war. Okay? And they fought. And then, of course, 1948, they got the country created. Another war was started.
Wait, wow. That is not what happened, my man. No. Balfour Declaration, Jewish migration into British Mandate Palestine. And at first, there is land acquisitions that take place. Fine, sure. Not the most arable land. It's all good. Okay? He already skipped past the point of the Nakba, but that's besides the point. But we're going to get to that in a second. The British occupied Palestinian territory after World War I was not favorable to the Palestinian occupants, the Arab occupants, in any way, shape, or form. Okay? It was the start of a settler colonial operation. Mass migrations of Jews began, and the British occupation absolutely favors the Jewish settlers as opposed to the Palestinian population. The Palestinian population are experiencing similar kinds of settler attacks that you see in the West Bank today. Okay? And the British occupation, similar to the Israeli occupation, defends the actions, the pogroms, the actions that the Arab indigenous population are receiving in the hands of Jewish settlers. Okay? There's a lot of land grabs. There's pogroms that take place. The Arabs, who make up the overwhelming majority of the working class at the time, try to implement strikes in the process. They try all of the different peaceful ways of resistance. In the process, they also develop some kind of militant resistance as well. Okay? Palestinians, not Arabs. Yes. Palestinians, the occupants, the actual occupants of first the area known as Palestine under Ottoman occupation, if you want to call it that, and then British occupation, British Mandate Palestine. There's a lot of back and forth. The Palestinians inevitably end up losing because the British heavily favor the Jewish settler colonial project. By the time that the British leave, okay, by the time that the British leave, the Jewish settlers have all the money, the Jewish settlers have all the weapons, the Jewish settlers have more and more land. Some they've purchased, some they've actually pushed the Palestinians out of. And then by 1947, the Jewish settlers design different Zionist brigades. Okay? in the aftermath of World War II, there is, of course, unprecedented levels of migration. There are a lot of refugees that are coming from all around Europe. Okay? They develop Haganah, Irgun, and Lihi as like the three primary Zionist brigades. You could consider them de facto terrorist organizations because at the time there is no established nation state, so they are technically de facto terrorist organizations. They are able to get a lot of arms from other countries. The USSR is one of the countries that actually traffic arms by way of Czechoslovakia. There's an embargo, and yet many people still send arms to the the Zionist brigades at that point. And they establish, which Ilhan Pape uncovered, Plan Dalet. The purpose of Plan Dalet is to create, to generate massacres in key Palestinian villages that have like neighborhood agreements with Jewish villages, Palestinian villages that are next to Jewish villages that already have established good relations with said Jewish villages. They go to Deir Yassin and numerous other Palestinian villages, and they slaughter the people there. Then they also hold hostage some of the Palestinians and parade them through the streets in Jewish neighborhoods. The purpose of this is to get the other Palestinian villages to take note of these massacres that are taking place. Okay? So that when they encircle other Palestinian villages in the process from 1947 to 1948, also known as Nakba, the Nakba, which leads to the inception of the Jewish state of Israel. When they encircle these other Palestinian villages, including major cities where Palestinians used to live that are now considered cities within the Israeli Green Line, they are forced to escape. They encircle the villages. They sometimes slaughter some of the Palestinians. And also, they blast clan tactics. They blast through speakers, like through megaphone speakers, whatever the fuck they had in technology. I don't know what it's called back then. Sounds of machine gun fire, bombs exploding, people screaming. They basically torture the Palestinian inhabitants of major cities. And after they encircle the cities, they only leave one exit point so that all of the Palestinians can escape through that appropriate exfiltration point. Yeah, megaphone, machine gun fire, screams, yeah. A process that Israel still utilizes against the Palestinians to this day. As we know, in Gaza, there are drones that will play the sound of a crying baby to draw out a Palestinian that wants to help, only to kill them. This is a thing that they're still doing. It was what they were doing back then as well. Once those Palestinians leave their homes with their keys, assuming that they're inevitably going to, be able to return, they're never allowed to return ever again. This process is systemic ethnic cleansing, also known as the Nakba, something that he just completely fucking glanced over as though it was insignificant, inconsequential. Only after that do the other surrounding Arab nations decide to take matters into their own hands, which Israel calls its War of Independence. Okay? 750,000 Palestinians were displaced in the process. 750,000, many of which were never allowed to return ever again. It glossed over. I shouldn't have said glanced over. He glossed over it as though it wasn't consequential at all. That is the inception of the Israeli nation state. That is something that most people don't know about. Many Jews don't learn about this process. Because Zionist education, Zionist indoctrination requires people not to know the truth. The Nakba wasn't just encirclement, it was attack and destroy. I already brought that up. I thought the militias attacked the villages first. Wait, what? I just explained that. That is how the Israeli state was established, through unprecedented violence, oftentimes in the hands of people who had just experienced the Holocaust. Okay? Turning around and doing unlimited violence to the Arab Palestinian inhabitants of this land that they wanted. And it's not like at its root, at its inception, the Zionist groups were oblivious to the colonialism that they were engaging in. They were aware of it. Because at the time, there wasn't such liberal, woke attitudes about colonialism. So that they openly said, this is what we're doing. Yeah, oldest story in the book. The oppressed become the oppressor. And that's what happened. The counterpoint, the Palestinian riots and the Hebron riots is an excuse, by the way. Nothing excuses ethnic cleansing. Yes, there's no excuse for ethnic cleansing. And for the record, the Palestinians were rioting because they were frustrated. They were frustrated that settler colonialism was happening. And guess what? They weren't fucking wrong. That is literally what happened. It's insane. They were rioting against the British occupation that not only was not offering them statehood, autonomy, dignity, sovereignty, but then on top of that, was bringing alien inhabitants to the land in order to openly displace them. And that's literally what they did.
And I know people say, well, this is a war to drive the Palestinians out. It was also a war to eliminate Israel, to basically kill Israel in the crib in 1948. And they fought and they fought and they fought and they fought. And at no point was there ever anything carved out for the Jews. And so the Jews have been fighting. And
how did the Jews get there, my man? There were Jews that lived there. Okay, it was approximately 2.5% of the population were Jewish, many of which were in Jerusalem when it was Palestine. A land without people for a people without land. It was bullshit from the start. There were people. There were inhabitants in that land. There was the indigenous population in that land. Oh.
Existential fight. And
it's so hard for me to, because I know you consider yourself, I think, liberal. You would describe yourself that way, like in the classical liberal sense.
But there's no liberal option on the table here. That's what I'm telling you.
Why?
You keep saying,
but
illiberal Jews, we cannot have. Illiberal Palestinians are fine.
No, but why should...
And I voted for it. It shouldn't.
Why should
I already answered that question. It shouldn't.
Okay, so, and is that your answer for this particular amendment, or will that continue to be your position moving forward?
That's where we're at.
So you're done with the U.S. funding Israel?
I think
work it out themselves.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. So I got to say, I mean, look, if
Socialist revolt.
The Democratic Socialists of America are screaming DSA over USA. And if people actually listen to what they're promising and who they are, their own survey says 85% white, 80% with a college degree. This is not the old Democratic Party of brown and black people, of blue-collar workers. These are folks who were told by the institution, the academic institutions, fork over 6 figures, get a degree with us, you can support yourself, have home ownership, maybe own a small business, Democrats be able to live the American dream, however you define that, and they're disappointed. Their grievances are weird, though, because if you actually listen to what they're promising, I don't think Republicans right now should just say, oh, socialism, socialism. They should explain to people what that means. That means no private ownership. That means health care for all, which sounds great but costs too much. And I actually think letting them talk and explaining who they are and showing who they are is a great benefit to the Republican Party. Last point, I was very critical in 2022 when our Republican candidates just thought we're going to have a red wave, red tsunami. We don't have to say anything. We have to complete our sentences. We have to show the distinction, the difference between Republicans and Democrats and your future.
Yeah, she said number one, free healthcare. Number two, death.
But they end up with Gaza, and they end up with anti-Israel, and they end up with these crazy ideas. It sounds like Bernie Sanders, a man who was stopped by the Democrats from being their presidential nominee in 2016 and again in 2020.
Is this Kellyanne Conway? Why does she look so different?
Jason, this is kind of an obvious point, but it's a very important point. Everywhere where Democrat socialists are winning is in Democrat strongholds. So every single one of these elections where these socialists are taking over...
Dude, it's so awesome. It's literally near-attended. There is no
Democrat
daylight between near-attended and
it's
Fox
not
News
like
commentators.
Normal policies that are being rejected here.
Yeah,
there is no
exactly
daylight
right. Look, the voters
between
are
establishment
driven by
neoliberals and Fox News commentators.
They're driven by authenticity as opposed to some fakeness that's coming out there. So what you're seeing is,
someone needs to do a supercut. Someone needs to do a supercut of like establishment liberals on CNN saying the identical things that Fox News is saying about the DSA.
Like that, you see the craziness. Now, here's one thing that I think has fundamentally changed. When Nancy Pelosi kind of came out of favor and out of power, she controlled the purse strings. And what's happened is the DSA has now taken control of those purse strings, is getting the money. That gives them some sort of the power. And what you don't see are the traditional Democrats, the politically dead man walking of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and even Hakeem Jeffries, who seem to be out of favor. They don't have the control of the financial apparatus like they used to, and consequently, these people are rudderless. They don't have a leader. They don't have a bench that they can lean towards.
Yeah. You know, Kellyanne, you mentioned this a minute ago, and I think it's really important. Obviously, and this is an election where the wind is at Democrats' backs, and for that reason, Democrats may do very well this time, despite all of the socialist lunacy that has taken over their party. But then what happens in 2 years when they've got all these lunatics in charge and they've got to run an actual election where the electorate really does show up in full force?
It's an excellent point, Charlie, because if you look at all of the polling, believe that the future of the Democratic Party is socialism, but the future of our country is not. Americans still reject socialism. And poll after poll shows that, especially among those who can actually define socialism and capitalism. And what's interesting about the DSA, and I think a real conundrum for all those typical, traditional, in-office currently party leaders, is that this is not anti-GOP. It's not even anti-Trump. It's anti-Democrat establishment. And it hit the Democrats unknowingly. The analogies to the Tea Party don't work. Those folks loved America. They were saying tax enough already. They actually reformed their party from the inside and gave way to Trump years later. This is very different. And I don't think it flies in 2028 across the states that
why
Jason
would that be different?
said. This is not,
the only major difference is, well, there's two major differences. One, Tea Party sucks dog shit. DSA is awesome. And number two, the Tea Party was a fucking AstroTurf movement by the Koch brothers. DSA is backed by the people.
To say, hey, that's very limited in certain places and spaces, but this, I'm going to bring my party to the center. Let's not be fooled that any of these folks are going to govern from the center. The DSA just makes it look that way.
Bro, this shit is awesome. We got them going. We need a strong Democrat Party. It didn't even take one full year. A couple victories. And immediately we got them singing like Nancy Jedediah Pelosi, being like, we need a strong Democrat Party. What happened? We need a strong Democrat Party. Democrats, what went wrong? Can you please go back? Can you please go back to being ritualistically humiliated by us? Can you please go back to being feckless in your indifference to the growth of fascism in this country? Please. That's like 8 fucking races, man. That's all it took. 8 races, and they're singing like Nancy Pelosi. Whoo! Amazing, amazing things are happening, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing things are happening. Yes, it is impossible for me not to notice how much the near attendants of the world sound identical to Fox News commentators, but it's also really funny because one of the things that I used to rail against the established Democrats all the time is when Nancy Pelosi and other people like that would constantly fucking say, we need a strong Republican Party. Republicans, Trump is not you. You are not Trump. You need to purge yourself of the Trump movement, of the MAGA movement. They kept deluding themselves that the Republican Party was anything but MAGA. Okay? And now you have Fox News saying the same, which means that we're shifting the Overton window. Okay? Which means we are shifting the Overton window successfully. We are ratcheting the shit back to the left. I believe it. Also, as far as like DSA, so white, among Democrats, which economic system do you prefer? White Democrats, capitalism by 40%, socialism by 38%. Non-white, socialism by 38%, capitalism by 27%. Look at that. Tell you all the goddamn time. Which of the following people are socialists? Sanders, 55%. Mamdani, 51%. AOC, 45%. Obama, 27%. Harris, 27%. Warren, 25%. Biden, 23%. Newsom, 20%. None of the above, 28%. Yeah, none of the above is right.
If tomorrow there's a peace agreement, okay, and they actually go forward with something where they create a reasonable alternative for the Palestinians in Gaza, if they actually stop what they're doing in the West Bank and get to peace in Lebanon, that may change. I don't see that happening, which is why I gave you the answer I gave. But again, this notion that somehow there's a liberal option on the table, and how could we possibly support the illiberal state of Israel? What's going to come in there? Okay, that's going to be liberal. Well, now, I'm with you on the taxpayer dollar piece.
You mentioned Rahm Emanuel's speech. You said you associate yourself. Yeah. If memory serves, he supports banking sanctions on Israel. You know, we sanctioned our ally at the time, South Africa. You support that? I am one of the original co-sponsors of the, it's the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, which sanctions Israel for what they're doing in the West Bank. Yes, absolutely. It's wrong. It shouldn't be done. Yes, we should sanction them, and we should specifically sanction Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are advocating so much of this. Yes. Okay. All right. Let's move on to some of these broader disagreements. And I guess a good transition into that is, how much do you think the question of the relationship with Israel-Palestine is serving as a litmus test in Democratic primaries? You know, from my perspective, it's been very important because it served as a proxy for kind of a host of other issues and concerns that the Democratic base has with the Democratic Party at this point. But I'm curious your perspective on how important that has become and the reason why you think it has become an important issue. It's becoming more important. It's not the most important issue. The most important issue, it's not even close to the most important issue in these primaries. The most important issue that is driving the anti-establishment feelings in the primaries is two things. Number one, the belief that we have not effectively fought Trump. Okay, when you look at what really drives these people, yes, Israel's part of it, but it's also going after, you were part of the establishment, how come you didn't beat Trump? Now, I have a complaint here, and that is that a lot of the policies of the DSA and the left, open borders, defund the police, the idea that you can't possibly spend enough government money, identity politics, a lot of those things are what gave Trump his power. And part of the reason those of us in the establishment struggled to beat Donald Trump is we were having to defend policies like open borders. Okay, and Trump walked right into that, all right? So the notion that it's just the establishment that led to Trump losing, I think, is a misplaced fact. Can we pause there for 1 second? Go ahead, get to your critique. So
And but I also think that the establishment Democratic Party, I mean, the whole Joe Biden thing, nominating, even thinking about nominating Joe Biden in
because of his age.
Well, because he couldn't. I don't care how old he is. He just couldn't speak. Okay, he couldn't communicate clearly.
Yeah.
Whether that was because he was old or because he couldn't communicate clearly, it had the same effect. And then the second big issue is income inequality. It is absolutely true that whoever has been governing for the last 20 or 30 years hasn't done enough to create opportunity for enough people.
Yeah.
Those two issues, I think, really drove the feeling of let's try something different. Now, the question is whether or not the DSA agenda is actually going to achieve either of those objectives. Is that what's going to help us defeat Trump and MAGA? Is that what is going to build a more broad-based economic thing? But this is where I am very sympathetic with the DSA. I'm an economic populist. All right, I think we should rewrite the tax code to actually tax rich people. I've been working with a woman, Ray Madoff. She's a professor up at Boston College who wrote a book about how we built our tax code so that investors.
So he's saying the DSA had an open border policy in 2024, which caused Trump to win, but Biden was the runner and DSA was not running anything. What the fuck's he saying? He's just chirping into the fucking wind. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just a rehashing of the exact same unprincipled, dogmatic approach, which is we didn't pivot to the center hard enough, and that's why we lost to Trump. Okay? That's it. That's it. He's just slapping the DSA sticker onto it because he just learned about it recently. You understand? Biden was DSA cadre. Yeah, Biden. That's right, Jack. I love Eugene Debs. Met him a long time ago. Good guy he was. He told me Biden. He's just repeating Republican talking points into the air that dumb liberals in D.C. only, by the way, bought immediately after 2024. That's why the base hates him, because they all suggest is surrendering to Trump. Yes. Yes. Male version of Diana DeGette.
Don't ever pay taxes. Let's change that, okay? I'm very pro-union. Stock buybacks. Why do we have stock buybacks? They didn't exist prior to 1982.
Yep.
So obviously corporations can exist without them. On that agenda, I'm there. Part of the problem I have with the broader agenda is you can't have free stuff for everybody all the time, and another message that the left gave us in the last 10 years was that deficits and debts don't matter. Are you familiar with modern monetary theory?
Of course.
Yeah. It's absurd. The idea that we can just spend as much money as possible is not a problem. Now, I want to tax people. I want a better social welfare state. But to argue that we can have a better social welfare state because the debt doesn't matter undermines the credibility of that argument.
I think with the decline of the U.S. dollar and potential risking of the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, it's something we have to think more about now. But here's let
that's
me drill,
the understatement of the morning, by the way. But
let me drill down a little bit on a few things you've said. So you've argued both from most of your argument against the DSA thus far, I think you could characterize as an electability argument. You think
No. It's bad policy.
Okay, so
I don't think having unlimited immigration is sustainable. I don't think getting rid of the criminal justice system is a smart way to govern. It's not just a.
He's just repeating. What is this? The establishment when Republicans win. The establishment when the left wins. Yeah, it's time for a daring maneuver, Democrats. Carville declares he can't be in the same party as Mamdani-backed candidates, calls for formal schism. Yeah, James Carville, when the Republicans won, turned around and wrote this article in February 25th, 2025, where he said, show your belly. Famously, this was his Democrats, show your belly. Punish the population, punish the voters, make them remember why they vote for you. That's what his argument was, which was a disastrous policy, but one that we took advantage of. Let's be real. Okay? Once that show your belly mentality caused so much frustration amongst the base that they started voting for real fighters, which happen to be Democratic Socialists, he's now turning around and saying, we got to do something about it. We got to destroy the Democrats to our left. We got to destroy them. Well, to that I say thank you. Thank you, James Carville. Yeah, the daring maneuver was to play dead and surrender to Trump. I know. Carville's play dead New York Times column did some harm to his anti-left faction. Have heard so many voters and polls cite it as the party establishment saying Dems should play dead instead of fighting. This isn't a crazy interpretation of the column. Carville's advice for the Dems was to retreat and to not respond to every Trump attack for a while as his popularity fell. The left did respond. The left didn't respond to every attack. There was no Save DEI rally, but it was out there doing stuff. Yeah, he's mad we're using do-nothing Democrats, and he told them to. Fucking priceless. Yeah. It's awesome. James Carville gave us a gift. He told the Democrats to not do anything. Now, probably Democrats weren't going to do anything anyway, but I'll give that credit to James Carville.
So here's a question I have for you. So back in 2018, you worked together with Pramila Jayapal on a bill to abolish ICE, which is a key demand.
I worked with her on a. Here's what the bill did. Okay, it's a slogan.
We have an article here from the Seattle Times, your local paper. U.S. Reps Pramila Jayapal and Adam Smith aim to abolish ICE, restructure immigration enforcement.
Exactly.
You were one of the Democrats actually who was in office when you voted for DHS.
Can I tell you what this actually does,
creation of
so
ICE?
we can have an intelligent
conversation?
conversation?
Of course. Yeah. Well, number one, do you still support this?
Yeah. Let me tell you what it does.
Okay,
because
but you still support it.
That doesn't help anything, because what is this? Can I?
Yeah, of course. But first, do you?
Yeah, here's the thing about the two-party system. A strategist on the Republican side that was so bad they wouldn't be fired. In the Democratic Party, they get promoted. Failures rewarded. Yes. Democrats always reward failures because their role isn't to actually win shit. Their role is to just lose gracefully and collect checks. Republicans actually have a horrifying, unbelievably toxic agenda, but they fight like hell to fucking implement it.
You can explain more in detail what it is.
I keep slamming the table. Jesus Christ, Adam Smith. Sure, Wealth of Nations is a good book, but Jesus Christ, dude, have some decency, sir. Oh, look at me, fucking invisible hand. Like, all right, dude, calm down, okay? We get it. You were impactful hundreds of years ago, okay? Calm down.
Tell you what it is. Okay.
Yes.
When we created the Department of Homeland Security, we took immigration enforcement away from the Justice Department and we put it into DHS and created ICE.
Correct.
What this does is it puts immigration enforcement back at the Justice Department.
And gets rid of ICE.
Right. Well, it gets rid of... Yeah, no, but...
That's my position, too.
But here's...
We're on the same page here.
Yes, but it doesn't get rid of immigration enforcement.
Okay, so hold on. Let me hold you to account again.
Yeah.
Tell me which candidates, specifically, not a policy paper that they're theoretically says, which candidates have said we should get rid of all immigration enforcement.
I forget the name. The woman who beat Andrew Espelot absolutely 100% said it.
Chevalier.
Yeah.
So you have one candidate who said that. Do you think that? Do you think that her views should be associated with everyone under the DSA label, or do you think that each person should be evaluated individually?
Many conversations with many immigration advocates, and I always ask them. And look, I'm in favor of a robust immigration system. I think what immigration enforcement is doing right now is an absolute crime. Okay, and it should be limited. And I think we should go back to the Justice Department. That's what I said.
And you still support the bill that you put forward.
Absolutely.
So you support abolishing ICE.
Well, abolishing ICE is just a rhetorical.
You don't like the label, but you support it, right?
But the problem is it means different things to different people. Okay, if you're talking about, no, let's go back to a Justice Department enforcement mechanism, that's fine. But there are a lot more people who support eliminating enforcement. And let me tell you the question I always, let me tell you.
You've given me one.
Let me tell you the question I always ask and the answer I always get from dozens of different immigration advocacy groups. I said, look, in order for this to work, you have.
I'm sorry, if you're a fucking Democrat, if you have the D next to your name, and you're repeating Fox News talking points, you're not a Democrat, okay? You're not a part of the opposition. You're a part of the fucking fascist party. I'm sorry. It don't matter that you got a D next to your name. This is unbelievably self-defeating, okay? When we criticize the moderates, we criticize them for their closeness to the Republicans, okay? Because we want the moderates to no longer be close to the Republicans in their ideology, in their advocacy, in their legislative agenda that they follow on, okay? When moderates do this to their left flank, they are repeating how close they are to the right-wingers, okay? He's not even a fucking Pinot. He's not. He's not even a progressive. He's a Dino, Democrat in name only. This is what I mean when I say no more to the fascist collaborators. Okay? That's it. That's it. It's fucking insane to me. Please say Pinot. No, Pinot more. I can't get enough. I love saying Pinot. Yeah, his district is D+22. We have to have someone in our fucking audience that can primary this guy for the love of God. DSA will raise you $100,000 if you primary this fucking loser. Oh, don't get me started. Now you're going to get all the Sawant fans in the chat.
Have to be able to tell me
and say there is someone primarying him.
And who wouldn't you let in
there
the
you
country?
Go.
And they literally never answer that
okay, are
question.
They in Congress?
They are advocacy groups.
And here's my other question for you is, you know, you want to take the most extreme positions that you can find in the DSA platform, or that
let me ask you this.
Let me finish my question, please. That one candidate, Daria-Lisa Chevalier, who I agree has positions that I think can legitimately be characterized as radical, right? You want to take those positions and you want to tar in.
I love it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to have some radical positions.
Entire group of candidates with them.
Well, let me ask you this.
Aren't you? Hold on. Aren't you effectively doing the work of the Republicans there?
Yes. Thank you, Krystal. Thank you. Krystal Ball, more like Krystal Ball knower. Okay. Finally.
That's always the answer.
People, they're all so crazy. They don't want any enforcement. They don't want any police. They don't want any borders.
Let me consolidate for you. Do you think
she's not against immigration enforcement? She's against using deportation instead of criminal justice. Yes.
All right. You've done your thing. Let me do my thing.
They could easily characterize your abolish ICE position as just as crazy and radical as Daria-Lisa.
But it might.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's true.
I can't because the Justice Department is going to enforce it. Let me ask you this. Joe Biden, his policy, okay, so not just one person in a platform, whatever. Do you think his policy was too lax in terms of border security?
I don't, but I acknowledge that politically that helped fuel the rise of the return of Donald Trump. So let me say
now, that is something that's widely supported.
But hold on a second. Which wing of the Democratic Party does Joe Biden come from? He doesn't come from the DSA left, does he? He comes from the establishment. And so to go back to one of the original,
wherever he comes from, how did he govern?
Well, he funded a genocide.
Did he govern as a woke? Is that the argument? Did Joe Biden govern as a woke, dude? Are these guys sincerely saying Joe Biden governed as a woke? Joe Biden won as a woke. He won as a woke. He had a 100-day amnesty plan. And then he threw it away. And then he thought, let's not fix any of these problems at the border. Let's not speed up the process of getting these people the proper paperwork, proper clearance to be able to work on U.S. soil. Hopefully it'll just go away. People will just forget about it. He was paralyzed because he was terrified of the reactionary forces that were saying, oh, he's just opened up the floodgates of migration. And he was also terrified of his left flank as well because he had promised that he was going to govern like a woke. And he didn't do anything. He chose the worst of both worlds. Joe Gundam.
So he governed in a lot of right-wing ways. But to go back to your original point about electability, I think it's very hard.
I never made a point about electability.
You did. You said that you thought that these positions, if you listen to your original answer, you said you thought these positions for the DSA were part of what brought back Donald Trump.
Fair enough, yes. But there's also policy concerns. But
okay,
yes.
But on the electability point, how can you argue that your camp within the Democratic Party has a lot of credence when it comes to electability when
I argued the exact opposite. I argued the exact opposite. I'm with you.
When Hillary Clinton loses to Trump, Biden wins by adopting some left-wing views, then loses to Trump. It was the establishment that propped him up, that forswore any sort of a primary. So how could it be the fault of the left that we're losing?
There's three things. Okay. I always say that the fall of the Democratic Party is a tragedy in 3 acts.
Okay.
Number one, we didn't do enough on the economic issues. And I think that Obama and Clinton get way too much of the blame for that. I think they really tried to get after broader economic issues, certainly the Affordable Care Act, a whole lot of other provisions that were put in there. But we didn't do enough on economic inequality. Number two, the left came along and took some positions that weakened us. I'm not blaming one group. Everyone's like, well, you're blaming us. What about them? It's like, there can be collective responsibility here, okay? It's not an either-or choice. Yes, we didn't do enough in economics. And then some of the positions of the left, and there were a lot of people running around. And when people say abolish ICE, do they mean abolish enforcement or do they mean change enforcement? Okay, and that's where you get into that difficult issue. We've had criminal justice problems, you know. The defund the police movement did not help us in any way. And it was a thing. And everyone's, oh, no, we never did that, okay? And then three, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Those three things are what led to us. And every time, I want to bring them all in, but people say, well, if you blame the left, you're just being a Republican. Well,
did the left have power in this country? No. It never had. Last time the left had power in this country, they forced the most historically popular Democrat to do the most historically popular piece of legislation, the New Deal. Okay? And ever since then, it's been over. It's been downhill from that point onward. His name was FDR, okay?
Well, can't we learn as we go?
Well, my problem is not with your...
It happened because he didn't do immigration reform, and also it was dysfunctional. He caused the refugee wave by sanctioning Cuba and Venezuela to hell. There was also a massive wave that was held back by the COVID shutdown. He's just a dopey idiot. What people object to is disorder and overwhelming services. Yes, he also should have, and I stand by this, he should have prosecuted Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis. He should have thrown them in jail for human trafficking, which he had sufficient evidence of. Because when Ron DeSantis and Governor Greg Abbott, Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, specifically started drop shipping refugees into northern states to gum up the works when they already had their fucking court cases in Texas. Joe Biden should have, one, immediately deployed funds to these states to ensure that the people were properly taken care of. Okay? And two, he should have prosecuted Greg Abbott and DeSantis for human trafficking. Because that's precisely what they did. It's crazy.
I have my own critiques of the left, right? I think that I actually think the identity politics thing came out of the Hillary Clinton campaign and was a way for the establishment to beat back the rise of the Bernie Sanders left. No doubt the left embraced it. I have been a critic of quote unquote woke, although I hate the word at this point in identity politics. That's my, my position. I'm a class first leftist. So I have my own critiques here. I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying when you caricature an entire wing of the party at this point.
Aren't you caricaturing the entire wing of the centrists and saying that we're all like,
no, because
I'm not caricaturing.
I'm not trying to say you have the same views as John Fetterman. I don't think that you do, or Josh Gottheimer for that matter.
And I'm not saying they all have the same views
You are trying to take the views of, let's say, Daria Lisa and the DSA platform and saying this is what the entire DSA coalition stands for.
I'm just saying it's an issue and it's a challenge.
Let me get you to, so I think the most prominent example of socialist governance in the U.S. right now is Zohran Mamdani in New York City. He got asked a question that's very relevant to this conversation about, what about people who are concerned about social.
What the fuck is Larper-Abi?
Socialism, are concerned about
Don't get into it. It's Minecraft roleplay. A person that LARPs you? Okay, fine.
democratic socialism. Let me get you to respond to what he had to say. This is E2.
For all of the fear-mongering around democratic socialism, the best response is to show what it actually means. And what we've shown over the last 6 months is exactly that. We've shown that a city with a democratic socialist vision is one that paves more than 170,000 potholes, 50,000 more than the prior administration by this point. It's just
so goddamn good. It's crazy.
City that has delivered the lowest recorded number of shootings, shooting victims, and murders in New York City's history. It is a city that is on a pathway to universal childcare, saving thousands of parents more than $20,000 a year. And it's a city that is doing all of these things while fighting for the people who are often left behind. Workers, who we've secured more than $10 million for, tenants more than $64 million. These are all indicators of what is so scary to a right wing that has built its entire power and framework on the idea of debating who should be left behind.
So is Zoran's version of socialism a version that you could get on board with, since he's really focused on the affordability pieces that you...
I am encouraged by what he's doing. And I think that form of trying to get things done, that's the other problem, is so much of the left, and certainly we experienced this in Seattle, became an academic exercise. They were spending all day long talking about, the history of racism, as opposed to going out in the community and saying, these are people who've been discriminated against. Let's get them access to capital so they can start businesses. Let's get them access to capital so they can get homes. Let's do a job, let's do workforce development so they can get jobs. It became an academic exercise about the history of the U.S. and about, are we, just an irreversibly bigoted racist, and that's all interesting. What are we doing to govern effectively? And actually, everything that Mamdani said right there, I'm encouraged. If you govern and focus...
Okay, Bhaskar Sunkara. My man's about to come out and be like, I'm a Bhaskar-style DSA, actually. I like to talk about how America had a lot of racist beginnings, but also it overcame racism. It's a very diverse country. We got to talk about the positives here.
So getting things done, so-called sewer socialism from back in the day.
Look at this fucking guy. Dude, come on. How can you not... Dude. How can you not look at where the conversation is headed and not feel at least a sense of confidence that we are having a tremendous impact? You got Godfather of capitalism, Adam Smith, out here talking about sewer socialism, man.
When you...
I mean, the fact that he knows what that is huge. Like, the fact that he's pretending to be in favor of at least socialist governance is I mean, this is unthinkable.
Had mayors who were socialists because they were going to go out and work.
Yeah, this fucking sellout Nasuda's dick riding Israel was talking about sewer socialism. It's like, dude, 2016, can you imagine? I mean, come on.
That's great. As an academic exercise, will you want to explain to me the history of oppression when you say things to me like, well, that person can make that argument because of the power dynamic, and we operate in this weird intellectual world that's got nothing to do with practical problem solving and logic, okay? That's where I have a problem. Michelle Wu up in Boston, also on the left, governing really well. There are other folks who haven't governed so well because they got trapped in this sort of ideological thing where the whole focus was on oppressed and oppression as opposed to actually governing well. So yes, I am encouraged by what I've seen in the last, 6-7 months in Mamdani's term. I'm a working class blue collar kid. I'm in favor of economic populism. And if socialism can work on that level, now I think you also have to recognize that private industry has to be part of it. Okay, we have to have businesses that grow. But yeah, I heard someone, I was up in New York a month or so ago, and someone said, the problem is we took the guardrails off capitalism. And over the course of the last 50 years,
yeah. We just got to get, dude, I was just thinking that, I was just thinking myself, I was like, the problem is corporate capitalism. The problem is corporatism. That's what it is. The problem is we took the guardrails off capitalism. Oh, shit, dude. Thanks, man. We got to reform it. You're right. More ethical capitalism. You see, real capitalism hasn't been tried.
We did. We took the guardrails off capitalism. So let's put those guardrails back on. And if you want to call it socialism, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But let's govern more effectively.
So let me ask you then. Josh Gottheimer said, if you're a socialist, you're not a Democrat. Sounds like you don't agree with that.
No, but again, the problem with this is the whole abolish ICE thing. You throw a term out that means 15 different things to 15 different people, and then you're like, do you support this? It's like, well, which one of the...
Dog, you're the abolish ICE guy. What do you mean? You're the guy. You said it too, man.
15 versions are you talking
I'm not asking you to support it, but he and others have said basically, we don't want these people in the party. We don't want to share the tent with them. And it doesn't sound like you're in that place.
I am not. Now, I think we ought to be able to have a conversation about the issues. I was sick to death, and you did it to me again, when I was trying to say, hey, look, on immigration, we need to show that we are in favor of enforcement. Well, you're just giving me Republican talking points.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
No.
You said something about me sound like a Republican earlier.
No. What I said
why can't we have a conversation about it?
What I said is that when you take the most radical position of one person or from a policy platform and you paint with a broad brush, you're handing Republicans a talking point. Oh, this is what these people are.
You did say the Republican
what I'm saying is that you could easily be put into that camp too, given some of your positions that you continue to hold. For example, whether you want to call it dismantling ICE or reorganizing ICE under a different agency or whatever you want to call it. You support getting rid of ICE.
It's not actually a joke. It's how are you going to enforce it? What sort of enforcement are you going to do? And if going back to the Justice Department makes sense to me. And, ICE would no longer exist, but you'd still have immigration enforcement. But this is the biggest...
Could you actually, I am curious your view, because the counter to that would be, well, if you're just going to do enforcement, why not just keep ICE and reform ICE, right? There's some group of people would say, oh, it's too radical to get rid of ICE. We need to just reform it, vet better, et cetera. Why do you think that it needs to be taken apart? Because obviously I agree with you.
What Trump has done with it, I think just puts it in a category. And I don't know, theoretically within the Department of Homeland Security, I suppose you could have immigration enforcement that made sense. But I think at this point we need a clean break. And look, the biggest thing that I want in all of this is the ability to have a conversation, all right? And this is my biggest problem with the left. I have been unable to hold a town hall meeting for a year because...
Why? Because people keep yelling at you about your fucking inconsistent Israel positions? Yeah, it's the left's fault that your constituents demand answers to your wishy-washy perspective on an issue that is, fairly fucking black and white. Is genocide.
Bunch of leftists show up and scream at me and don't let it.
Oh, dude, that sucks, man. How about you build some kind of backbone and stand on your principles? If your principles are pro-genocide, then you're fucking pro-genocide, Perhaps the problem, and this is the endless Democrat problem, is that the voters are far more woke than you are. And they vote for you either reluctantly or because you duped them into believing that you cared about those values. And perhaps now, when there are real alternatives that fit that standard far better, you guys are freaking the fuck out because it makes you look like a fraud. This is the issue for a lot of Democrats. They keep complaining about the voters not voting for them and voting for someone else. That's all this is about. Like every day they're like, oh, well, we have to spend a lot of money on our fucking primaries. And it's like, well, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that at all. You could just govern effectively. You could actually govern on the values that you claimed you would fight for, and no one would have this issue. Is there a left position against AOC? Is AOC getting outflanked by her left in her district? Is Bernie Sanders, he's 850 years old. Is Bernie Sanders getting primaried successfully? Is Rashida Tlaib getting primaried? Is Ilhan Omar getting primaried? Perhaps there's a reason. Just be a fucking public servant and do the bidding of the masses, the people that fucking voted for you. And then you won't have to demand millions of dollars from the Democratic Party's coffers to protect your cushy sinecure. That's what's so funny about this whole like internal fissure in the Democratic Party. Like, oh, these left flank candidates, these insurgencies, what are we going to do? They're fucking coming after us. Oh, we got to spend a lot of money that we would normally spend in the general. We're wasting money. It's like, you don't have to do that. Get your fucking 874-year-old ass to fundraise and to go out and do fucking town halls then. Why don't you do that? Why don't you build your own fucking movement? Why do you have to sit there and demand that Hakeem Jeffries bail your ass out? Oh no, Zoran is coming out with the Bibi Netanyahu.